Hmm.
And there were a couple of incidents over the years, like I think it was the 80s in Austin, Texas. A bar was raided and they arrested people for the fantasy baseball league for gambling, and the Fort Lauderdale Fire Department, another one that they arrested them for gambling. And so it's been, for years and years, question is fantasy sports gambling when you're involving, money in it. And
Hmm.
finally, it got resolved by the federal government deemed it's not gambling, and 45 states have deemed it's not gambling, and about five states still say it is gambling,
Right.
and have made it, illegal to have fantasy sports for money. And the common, the main, what's the word I'm looking for? The main point to determine if it's gambling or not is the question: is it more luck than skill? If it's more luck
Hmm.
than skill, like a roulette wheel is obviously
It's
all
gambling.
luck.
It's
Yeah,
all luck. Yeah.
unless you have ESP, roulette is 100% luck. So that's gambling.
Uh-huh.
But if it's more skill, then it's not gambling. And so they determined, fantasy sports is actually there is luck involved, but it's more skill than luck.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Larry, because when you look at a site like DraftKings or some of the sites out there, FanDuel and all of those guys, you can play fantasy sports, but there's always that disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that says, "Please gamble responsibly," which it just throws everybody off in a sense because
Well,
are you
yeah,
gambling or you're
yeah. Daily fantasy sports really pushes the envelope of that question: is it gambling or not? And now, like DraftKings, they also have a sports book. So I'm
Mhm.
not even sure, like that warning about the gambling, I'm not even sure if that's because they have a sports book or if they have that just for daily fantasy sports.
Mhm.
Um, but you can make a stronger argument that daily fantasy sports is gambling than you can with like season long fantasy sports.
Mhm.
But even then, they kind of prove that even daily fantasy sports, it's more skill than luck. So therefore, not gambling.
Okay. Okay. You,
Interesting.
there was another fascinating part of the book where you talked about in some of the origins of fantasy sports, how they determined the scoring. And I remember there was one area I read where is related to fantasy football. I think they allotted 50 points for a quarterback throwing a touchdown. I mean, it was just the point system was like enormous because I think about how we play fantasy football today in our league that me and Jacob are in. Some a team might at the end of a football week might have maybe 150 points to 200 points, but back then it seemed like, man, you could score 2,500 points, with your team.
Yeah, I mean, people had different kinds of scoring systems, but like the original league with Winkenbach, um, they like is mostly only touchdowns. So, and then Andy Mussolima started to tweak the rules when we started his own leagues in the bar. He started to tweak the rules because he said, like, only touchdowns back then. He said, back then O.J. Simpson would run for 100 yards, and Pete Banaszak would have the 1 yard plunge for the touchdown. So Pete
Hmm.
Banaszak's getting all the
Mhm.
points for a 1 yard plunge, and Simpson's running for 100 yards. He got nothing. So they
Mhm.
started to add points for yardage.
Mhm.
And then you got like Emil Padleck, who's in the book. He was involved in a couple of big things. He's the guy, one of the guys that started high stakes fantasy football with live drafts in Vegas, and he also started one of the first magazines that became very, very large. Um, but Padleck was in his own, you know, fantasy football league with friends for years and years, and they had very simplistic rules. And every year, he in the off season, he kind of try to get them to add something more interesting like, how about a point per reception, or some
Hmm.
other thing. And they're like, no, we don't need that crap. Like our rules are the best ever. We don't need to change anything.
Gene, there is one thing that you can take away from the old iterations of fantasy football that we need to put in ours. Something that I and I alone have been asking for. So, in the beginning of the book, everybody that has the league, they all do one thing, and that is individual defensive players. You play a linebacker, you play a corner, or you play a defensive lineman. It's individual defensive players. Greatest invention of all time is having that involved in your fantasy league.
Yeah, and some still have that. I would say most probably don't have it. I've personally
Hmm.
have never been in a league that has it.
We do one league. So my uncle and I are co-commissioners for this league. We've had it running for 11 years now. And we do, it's, I think, 9 individual defensive players that you also have to draft on top of your typical offense. And it's a lot more work, but it's more fun. It
Yeah,
makes you pay attention to more.
You do. It is a lot of work, and I think the reason why we sort of went with, like some of the traditional ones, like you even mentioned in your book, Yahoo Sports. That's the first time I ever started playing fantasy sports. It was through Yahoo, and then so they came up with defense special teams, which
yeah,
sort of kind of if you pick the right defense special teams, you never know from week to week who's going to have a good category. But one reason why we chose not to do the individuals because it's just so much. It just takes so much. It's so time consuming to
yeah,
where
yeah,
um,
yeah. Especially if you're
you
doing
know.
9 like Jacob.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm mostly in leagues where you get one defense, maybe
It's a
and
team.
kicker. Yeah, um, you know when fantasy sports started, um, one of the reasons, like going back to Oakland, like one of the reasons they picked the categories that they picked is because that's what was available in the newspapers.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
there were a couple other categories they would like to have had, but they weren't published in the newspaper. So they couldn't do it. Now, there was an exception where there was a USA Today office league that started, and they wanted to have, I can't remember the category. It might have been caught stealing or something. I can't remember. But there was a category. USA Today started office league, and there was a category they wanted to have, but it wasn't published in the newspaper. But because they were the USA Today, they had the power to start publishing it.
Hmm.
So they added this category to their publication for their fantasy league.
Which is wild. Like
Interesting.
just the
Yeah.
evolution of it over time is interesting.
Larry, I remember back in the 90s, and look, I've worked a ton of odd jobs besides, doing radio and stuff. But one particular part-time gig I ended up doing was working for a company called Stat Inc. Okay.
Yeah,
And I think my job, and they had like thousands of people across the country watching these same games.
yeah,
And I guess they would just, you report what you saw and whatever stats, whether it's Hakeem Olajuwon, how many rebounds did he have, this, that, and the other. And yeah, I mean, it paid him easily, what, I don't know, $50 a week. But now that I look back on it and after, reading the book, it's like, man, this is gathering all of that information. And of course, now they just throw it into a computer.
well, guess what? Technically, you're mentioned in the book because Stats Inc. is in the book, and it mentions how they had
Hmm.
people watching games, collecting the statistics, and you were one of those people.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. I know when I saw that, I was like, wow. I said, I can't believe it. I mean, yeah. And I thought it was kind of tedious work at the time, but man, who
Oh
knew
yeah.
that it actually meant something? And when you look at that today, so Larry, a question I have for you. So where do you see it kind of like going today? I mean, where it is right now. how could it be enhanced? I mean, is it gonna go away? You think? I mean, or is it gonna blossom even more? I mean, what are your thoughts on the future of fantasy sports?
It's never going to go away. Um, I mean, people, a lot of people who play fantasy sports say they're going to keep playing until they die. You know, in a survey, I think it was 40% or more in the survey said they're going to play until they die. You know, it's not going to go away. And people keep thinking it can't get bigger, and it keeps getting bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Jacob?
To kind of piggyback off of that, there was a better piggyback earlier. But so I mentioned that there was some that was the second most interesting part of your book to me earlier. The first, the cumulative effort from front to back of your book. The biggest takeaway that I took was that the founders, the creators of fantasy, but football and baseball primarily, just because those are the two biggest sports. The true founders of it didn't necessarily make a dime off of its creation. And to me, that stood out a lot. But Larry, since you did all the research, you compiled all of the information and whatnot. As you were writing this book, what was the thing that stood out the most to you while you were writing it? Like, what was the one takeaway that just kind of blew your mind?
Well, I think, I've mentioned before that the fact that I would keep discovering one thing after another that I didn't know about, and I knew almost nobody else knows about. And it was either fascinating, inspirational, funny, or a combination of the three. And I just knew, my God, nobody knows this stuff, and it was amazing. And, Paul Charchian, one of the first people I gave the book to was Paul Charchian, who is very involved in the industry, and he was the president of the Fantasy Sports Trade Association for like 10 years. And he read it and he said, I've been in the industry my whole life and I didn't know a lot of this stuff. He was fascinated by it. So that's one thing. And the other thing, as I said before, is just realizing how fantasy sports brings people together, like, incredibly. The whole, it's a cultural phenomenon.
Now,
Yeah.
do you still play, Larry, today?
Oh yeah, I play football and baseball. Before I came on tonight, I was looking at tight ends.
Okay.
So
look,
I'm getting ready for my draft.
We found this picture here, and so kind of explain what's going on here. What's this trophy? It looked like baseball, right? So what is this? Is this part of that $110,000 windfall?
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. We got it real time there, man.
That is, what year is this? That's from 2011. I won the Tout Wars.
Okay, yeah.
Tout Wars is one of the two experts leagues.
Yeah.
And they generally don't give a trophy. But that was one of the years that it actually the Saber Society gave us trophies that year.
Yeah. What is your take on there's a lot of people that fantasy football leagues, I guess, our fantasy football league for years it was just simply free, and now we've had these guys play this league for a couple of years now. We take it serious, but now we have oh good Lord, look at the rate for what we charge, Larry, we'll never catch up to you with with the six-figure stuff. But what do we do, Jacob? I think our top guy wins what, $600-$700, I don't know, and then there's a second place,
600,
and then there's a third place.
Yeah, 600. What is it? 600, 300, 150.
So my question, I guess, if you're going to charge people to play this, then is it is it best you get serious people that really want to play, because other than that you're gonna have a bunch of whiners?
Well, a lot of people are in leagues with no money involved. It's just for, the competition and bragging rights. And a lot of leagues have, relatively small amounts of money. And then there's some high stakes leagues. There's I mentioned before, Emil Pavlik is one of the people that started the whole high stakes concept. And there are some people that play in these leagues where there's $350 entry fee or $1,700 entry fee, and some are even $5, $10, $20,000 entry fee.
Wow, Jacob, we got a long way, man, to get to that
But
point.
there's not,
Right?
but of all the people who play fantasy sports, the percentage of people who are in leagues with that, much money involved is not, that's not very high.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I'm holding out hope that one day Gene pays me enough money that I could enter a $20,000 fantasy league.
Yeah.
That's really, at this point, it's my hope and my dream.
So Larry, you say you're into it right now. We got baseball that's going to be winding down here pretty soon. You got football that's starting up. Oh yeah, but there's a lady that you mentioned in the book who we had the pleasure of having her on the show. We were at the Super Bowl, 2017 Super Bowl. I think it was the Falcons and the Patriots. And Cynthia Freeland, she stopped by.
Yeah.
And she joined us on the show. I love her work. She is a numbers person, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a chapter in the book about sabermetrics and advanced analytics and how that started and evolved, and she's mentioned in that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to that goes back to a quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, who was the first one to really start looking at advanced analytics.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So look, we can't let you leave without getting some sort of tips or pointers here. Now, this is where I should probably kick Jacob off the show and just me and you talk, but I'm not going to do that to him. Because
Jacob,
we both need a fair advantage here.
Don't take long promo doomsday.
Really?
Oh, wow!
I've heard there's a little concern about his recovery from injury.
Because he was out for like the last 7 weeks of last season. There's concerns that it's not totally healed. That's great information. He was on my board, so
yeah. I mean,
well,
this is another thing that's developed is they're injury experts.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the chapters in my book is called like innovative entrepreneurs. With some random things like injury experts being one of them that just evolved. There's like these doctors who know. They really know all this stuff, and they apply it to fantasy sports. And they say, look, this guy had this particular injury, and he's not going to recover well from that. Or to the contrary, he'll be fine. Stephania Bell is, in that.
Yeah, I remember her.
She's one of the big ones, and they're,
Yeah, she's real big. So, how much emphasis, or if any, do you put on? Because we tell our friends we watch the preseason. Tomorrow night I'll be at the Raiders and Texans preseason game. We from our perspective, because we got to have something to talk about it. But even from a fantasy football perspective, later on in the year, these guys that you see on these rosters now that's trying to get on the team or make the team, they might be impact players later on in the year. Like if your number ones go down. So do you put any type of importance on the preseason as it relates to fantasy football?
I don't put a lot of emphasis on preseason, but there's obvious stuff. If obviously somebody gets hurt and there's some positional battles, but most of the positional battles aren't necessarily relevant to fantasy. Like, if a guy is going to be the third running back instead of the fourth running back, you're not going to draft him anyway. But there's obvious stuff where, is Cam Scatterbo healthy? Is he going to be number one? Or, they just signed Najee Harris, so it looks like it may also be a committee. I'm not saying anything brilliant here. I'm just kind of stating the obvious. But going back years ago, there wasn't this kind of information. Like Ian Allen, who started the magazine I mentioned earlier, he would have people from all over the country send him, videotapes of games, because you couldn't watch games. If you're in Seattle, you can watch the Seahawks, but you can't watch all the other teams back then. So he'd have people send videotapes of preseason games, and he would watch them to see what was going on. Because now you look at RotoWire, RotoWorld, and all these other websites are available, and if you get all this information about people who are hurt or their position battles. Is Kyler Murray starting or is JJ McCarthy starting? You get all this information easily, but years ago you didn't get information. You had to dig for it. And that's why people started magazines and started other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, once again, we are talking with author of The History of Fantasy Sports and the stories of the people who made it happen. Larry Schechter is joining us tonight here on the Sports Kings NFL Weekly Prediction Show. Next week, we'll definitely be talking. We're going to do our draft next week, and we actually do this draft online, which is kind of fun. Now, look, we have to navigate the show, and we got these computer screens, so it's kind of fun. We've done it. We did it. We launched it in Vegas when we had a residency at Virgin Hotel, so we did our big fantasy football show out there. And speaking of Vegas, Larry, are you surprised at how many people traveled to Las Vegas to hold their fantasy football drafts? I mean, I think it's thousands. Even the hotels out there are in on it because they charge extra for the space, because they know this time of the year, late August, people are flocking out there to hold their drafts.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, people doing fantasy drafts in person is fun. Vegas is fun, typically, or sometimes too much fun. But yeah, that was
now
that goes back. Elmo Cadleck and his partner, they did the first Vegas draft. They took a big risk seeing if that concept would work. They could have lost a ton of money on that, but it worked out once they started the whole high stakes industry.
Now I will have to go ahead.
I was going to mention too, just the book is available on Amazon. You can get all the details of what's in it. See, all the reviews are great. It's also available. Most booksellers' websites have it available in paperback and ebook, and it's on Apple and Kobo and all the normal ebook channels. So people should either buy it or get it on your wish list for your birthday or Christmas. And it makes a great gift for people. Like if you get like my first book, Winning Fantasy Baseball, if you're in a baseball league, you want to read that and not tell your league mates about it. Any kind of good advice and strategy, you don't want to tell them, go to RotoWire but this is a book you can buy for your whole league. There's no strategy in there, so you're not losing any competitive advantage.
Yeah, that is true. But look, and I have to admit here and agree with you. When it comes to fantasy draft day, it is like having sex for the first time, because you don't know what the hell is going to happen. I love that.
You're not agreeing with me. I didn't say that's in the book. I didn't say that. That was one of the guys.
It is.
That was one of the guys.
One
of the guys in Dan Oakland's original league. He's the one who said that. He said, like, the first draft is like, it's like sex. I don't really know what's happening, but want to come back for more.
Hilarious, hilarious, and that's the way we're going to be next week, Jacob, when we do our draft. Larry, man, we are so we're going to be respectful of your time. We know it's getting late there on the East Coast, but we are so grateful for you joining us tonight. And we're going to put this back up here again. We want to make sure that people go out and get this book. It's great. Do it. Get the book. If you're a fantasy football player, it's a must-have. Okay. And if you're the girlfriend and wife of a fantasy football player, then you might want to get it because you need to know what the hell's going on as well, and you need to know why this is such a big thing, because it's fascinating. This is marvelous. So we thank you for coming on and joining us tonight.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right,
Thank you, Larry.
Great stuff. So what we're gonna do next week, we'll come back and we will definitely. Jacob, great stuff. I mean, like you said, there's no competitive advantage, and but there's tons of information, and I know. I mean, look, there was so much in this book we could have asked Larry about. There's so much to go over, man. But just you read the book, you get it from A through Z. I know we bounced around a little bit because there was a lot of information we wanted everybody to know, but great stuff.
Absolutely. And anybody watching the show, right? I hate reading. I can't emphasize that enough. I won't pick up a book to save my life. I stopped in 2015 and never looked back. And the book is phenomenal. So all of the stories we reference throughout the show, they're better in the book. It's funny.
Absolutely.
It is an easy read. Go buy Larry Schechter's book.